everyone, and welcome to the Grolier. My name is Fiona, and I'm very glad to welcome the woman who will be doing the introductions for each of the poets tonight. Joanna Birdsell is a Ph.D. student of Slavic languages and literatures at Harvard University, where she is currently working on the first English translation of contemporary Polish novelist Manuela Gretzkova. Underlying all of her activities is an interest in the spiritual and the esoteric, as they permeate contemporary poetic consciousness. It is through this lens that she hopes to give voice to Sevinç's haunted space, an inner world where time doesn't flow or tick, it grieves. She is currently editing her first cycle of bilingual poetry, Exorcisms, which captures a dissonant identity, purging through and against romantic narrative. Welcome, Joanna.
Okay, thank you, and welcome all. Yeah. Today I have the pleasure of introducing two dear friends, two poets, Sevinç Çalhanoğlu and Efe Murad. Sevinç is a poet, artist, and researcher whose work examines the imprint of memory on space and the intersection of both with literature. In addition to poems and essays, she creates interdisciplinary literary works, incorporating sound and photography. She is the author of two books of poetry in Turkish, the original edition of A Promenade at Home, and now they're at Wellesley, and is an initiator of the Turkish poetry journal Moero. My Life in Curves, recently a zine of hand-drawn graphs plotting her daily rhythms and habits during coronavirus lockdown, was published by Board Wolves in 2020. Sevinç joins us today from Brooklyn, New York, and will read selections from her recent work, her recent book in English translation, hot off the press, A Promenade at Home, translated by the excellent joint effort of Ayça Akarsu and Jansen Maivituna. The extended second edition of the book will come out at the end of this year. And unfortunately, we will not be able to show the illustrations of Sevinç's book, A Promenade at Home. If you have a chance to look after, it's essential, I think, integral part. They are her illustrations, all of what you see. Now, Efe Murad was born and raised in Istanbul. He is the author of 6 books of poetry and the translator of 6 more, including the first complete translation of Ezra Pound's Cantos into Turkish. Volumes by the American poets Susan Howe, Lynn Hygenian, and C.K. Williams, and together with Sidney Wade, Silent Stones, a collection of poems by the Turkish modernist Meri Cevdet Ande, which was awarded the Meral Divici Prize for Turkish Poetry in Translation. A scholar of Ottoman history and Islamic philosophy, he is currently a professor of history and religion at Wellesley College. His ongoing practice melds mystical experience, paleography, found footage, and soundscapes. An Organ of Quality, a cycle of poems, will be published by Board Wolves in 2022. And Efe joins us today from Cambridge, one of our local poets. Yeah. And he will read selections from his recent book, The Pleasures of Empty Lots, published also by Board Wolves in 2021. I will now briefly introduce their respective books, just their surface, and hope the essence will come to you from their voices, yeah? Either here in this room or through the ether, with Zoom, yeah? So starting with A Promenade at Home. Equal parts lyric and performative, A Promenade at Home is a meticulous cataloging of possession in all of its forms. Revisiting her childhood home in spirit, Sevinç overhears a conversation between her mother and this ancient house. Their dialogue is a cantilated litany of decorations past and present. Meanwhile, her mother bustles about with broom and bleach, seeking to disrupt the settling of dust and malefic hexes in rooms that arrange themselves into a theatrical set. As Sevinç proceeds to piece together painful memories of coming of age in this humble middle-class household, she reckons with an interior's ability to occupy its occupants, specifically her mother, and through osmosis and inheritance, the poet daughter, and explores how a home touched by grief can become a haunted space. With cathartic intent, Sevinç excavates the microhistorical, retrieving memories long muffled by carpet in an effort to assuage the white noise of trauma. And the pleasures of empty lots, scenes of Istanbul, of Efe Murad. Let's begin with a short fragment. I left Istanbul after graduating from high school in 2006. It was only in July 2015, less than a year after Erdogan assumed the presidency, that I found myself living in the city again full-time to conduct manuscript research and improve my classical Arabic reading skills. My parents' railroad apartment was a location where I lacked the liberty to edit my poems in peace and to cultivate the sense of a poetic bewilderment so beneficial to my practice. I therefore had to put on my shoes and abandon it. And with that, Efe sets off into the streets of his native Istanbul, wandering in search of empty benches, weedy lots, and myrrh-scented subterranean shrines, gaps in the claustrophobic concrete beyond the reach of the regime and the police, where a young poet with his pockets full of inky drafts is free to sip a can of beer and puff like a magic dragon. Finally, at the end of a dead end overlooking the sea, Efe finds a spot where he can edit his visceral verse in something like peace as the sun sets, a pool brews, and jellyfish accumulate off the coast of Kadıköy. And with that, I think we can introduce Efe. Yeah.
First of all, welcome all on such a day. I think we got the first snow in Cambridge/Boston. So I think we'll be kept here during the snowstorm. Can you hear me? The Pleasures of Empty Lots. Scenes of Istanbul, 2015-2016. When the world takes up no space but I. Ah, we lonely ones, free spirits, it's born home to us that in some way or other, we constantly appear different from what we think. A clean slate. Contemporary Turkey is under the spell of a personality cult. Social conservatism is ascendant. Islamic discourse pervades every single aspect of daily life, including the contre-attempts between poets. It is common for Twitter mobs to be directed against deviant writers. In almost every case, the attacks are ad hominem. Any form of literature that is exposed to unconditional power will succumb to it. What remains are the ephemeral moments of literary creation beyond ideological schisms and feudal skirmishes between camps of poets. This humble chapbook is a record of the unheard and the unseen, which can only be experienced by those who find pleasure in ephemeral escapades. It is a longing for a clean slate, a tribute to benevolent loitering. The city does contain many secret spots, peaceful pockets where those going loopy from claustrophobia can find temporary relief. But these nooks and crannies are only visible to the poets. Otherwise, the sea of buildings that hems you in wherever you go in Istanbul is inescapably suffocating. Every last public space has been commandeered and occupied by the state. There are few large open areas left for public demonstrations or gatherings. For poets, the urban guerrilla campaign of evasion ensues. The only way to slip from this trap, however briefly, is to seek out the invisible niches haunted by the unknown, enfant terrible of Turkish poetry. Blind allegiance. Over the last 2 decades, Turkish poetry has seen the release of many daring poetry manifestos. Some of the main themes shaping this new generation of experimentation expand on avant-garde literary techniques such as cut-up, automatic writing, concrete poetry, and the death of agency within the creative process. In 2004, Cem Kurtuluş and I published our Matter Poetry Manifesto, integrating ourselves into a complex network of progressive poets from Ankara and Izmir to Adana and Konya, who were going against the grain. Our intention was to write selfless poems devoid of any pronouns, adjectives, and critically agents. That is, to construct purely self-reflexive poems from the perspective of objects, as in Thomas Nagel's view from nowhere. Our main influences were the Vienna Gruppe and the Brazilian Noigandres group. Some of us read and also translated the American modernists, as well as Black Mountain poets like Charles Olson, Robert Creeley, and Paul Blackburn. These new currents in Turkish poetry were not limited to the self-proclaimed avant-garde that I am part of, but also included others coming from different walks of life, who were our friends at first before becoming our nemesis. The neo-epic group was comprised of former anti-neoliberal Islamist poets arguing for a new form of populism through epic poetry. Initially, both the Kadıköy avant-gardists and the neo-epics had bonded over our mutual contempt for the use of any sort of saccharine imagery in contemporary Turkish poetry. We were all visceralists at heart. The main disagreement between the factions only became apparent after the neo-epics cop-out. Our Kadıköy avant-garde, in addition to rejecting any form of agency, stood in fundamental opposition to the culture of blind allegiance, biat kültürü, and the hegemonic power it enables. In contrast, the traditional codes of political Islam always speak from the perspective of the imagined first-person plural. The Islamist poets were never able to renounce the self-mythologizing we. In the Quran, Allah refers to himself in the first-person plural, while those who don't belong to his, i.e. our community, are herded into an inorganic they. If they cannot be brought into the tribe, then they must be degenerate and ostracized as such. There is a clear geographical demarcation between the avant-gardists and the neo-epics in the form of 2 districts on the Anatolian side of Istanbul, Kadıköy and Üsküdar. The latter, a neighborhood on the Anatolian shore of the Bosphorus, is the stronghold of the Islamist poets. Eliasa Koytak, a neo-epic poet, who in his poems glorifies Islamic fundamentalism and sectarian violence, boasted over tea in Üsküdar that he had not set foot in Kadıköy for 5 years. Even though he does not deny that Kadıköy has an authentic subcultural identity, he considers it a place for those who are confused and unable to come to terms with the realities of present-day Turkey. As matter poets, though, Cem and I had this cheeky way of trolling the neo-epics. Pretending to be pompous Islamist poets, we used to go into random tea houses in Üsküdar and carry on loud conversations, pontificating about the future of Islamist poetry with socially conservative rants. We recorded our satirical diatribes and later edited them into poems, which we published as the chapbooks Appendicities Internationale and Cretin, tapes 2014-2016. After reciting one moralizing story after another, our stomachs would eventually rebel against the copious quantities of tea we had slurped. Poetic bewilderment. The Kadıköy neighborhoods of Moda and Bahariye conceal a number of dark subcultural streams that lead one toward heady experiences of underground poetry activity. However, the number of undercover cops patrolling in the area has increased, especially since the 2013 Gezi Park protests, a wave of demonstrations and civil unrest which began in May of that year, primarily to contest the unrelenting concretization of Istanbul and corrupt neoliberal development plans for desiccating Gezi Park, one of Istanbul's last concentrations of green in favor of a shopping mall. Youths are routinely harassed by the police and subjected to body searches down to their socks. In elections held in June 2015, Turkish voters delivered a major blow to President Erdogan's attempts to solidify his grip on the country. AKP, the party he controls, lost its governing majority, resulting in a hung parliament. That August, after endless coalition negotiations with the opposition, failed to produce a new government. Erdogan called for, along with his partner Devlet Bahçeli, for a snap election to be held in November. In those elections, AKP regained its majority in an atmosphere of violence and intimidation of opposition media. From August 2015 up to the violent coup attempt of July 2016, the state showed its hideous face by deliberately failing to take requisite safety measures as major cities, including Istanbul, were rocked by bombings that primarily targeted opposition rallies, peaceful Kurdish demonstrations, tourist and secular districts. Heavy blows were also dealt to press freedom and freedom of expression. In order to shore up its voting bloc, the AKP, exploiting a collapse of the ceasefire with Kurdistan Workers' Party militants, doubled down on a strategy of using militaristic rhetoric to inflame Islamist and jingoistic fervor. As early as late summer 2015, there was no air to breathe. I had left the city after graduating from high school in 2006. Over the next decade, I returned to visit my parents and friends at least twice a year. It was only in July 2015, less than a year after Erdogan assumed the presidency, that I found myself living in Istanbul again full-time to conduct manuscript research and improve my classical Arabic reading skills. My parents' railroad apartment was a location where I lacked the liberty to edit my poems in peace and to cultivate the sense of poetic bewilderment so beneficial to my practice. It was an uptight household, cramped in every sense of the word. My mind designated its square feet a no-go zone for poetic release. I, therefore, had to put on my shoes and abandon it. I had to use public transportation on a daily basis. The police stopped me at least once a week. On 2 occasions, they stripped off my coat and removed my shoes and socks. Another time, I was caught with a smidgen of the gummy black hash called Marok, colloquial Turkish for Moroccan style, which I had stuck to the back of my phone case. The police rolled a spliff for themselves and fortunately released me after approvingly observing that I was carrying numerous books in Arabic, including the antiquarian Ottoman tomes with crumbling pages. A footnote. One such volume was the 1903 edition of the 15th century Ottoman theologian Şemsüddin Hayali's classic gloss on the Sharhul Aqaid, the bedrock text of the Sunni Creed and a common madrasa handbook still read in the Muslim world. Certain denominations of Anatolian Sufism regard hashish as the ideal antidote for narcissism. It purges claims of agency and kills the ego. This sort of Sufi metadoxy is also the ideal alternative to the Sunni Islam championed by the neo-epic poets, those upholders of Muslim orthodoxy. Ottoman culture arguably coined the most enigmatically elegant name for hashish, esrar, a word which came to mean mysteries in Arabic and Turkish, a door opener to the sublime. The antinomian mystics and wandering dervishes were said to have composed extemporized riddles and disjointed poems under the influence of this substance, elucidating their union with God and sense of mystical bewilderment. Hayret. Such works of enchanted gibberish may sound loopy at first, but the bewildered mystic poet, Hayran, a double entendre which in the language of the 13th century Anatolian Sufism also referred to a person high on hashish, uses word sounds as a means of ordering scattered and non-sequential thought. Whoever hears these poems loses all sense of their surroundings. Swept away by the salvific urge, they experience, in the words of poet Feni Hao, a complete failure in the magnet, the compass, the scale, the stars, and the movement of the rivers, leading to the complete collapse of reference and reconcilability. Jellyfish, cats, and a pig in clover. Whereas cafes are products of the spectacle culture, originally conceived for those who want to see and to be seen, side streets and corners are for poets. Of course, any worthwhile cafe has its own shadowy corners for set poets, in case it is raining cats and dogs outside. In the company of fellow poets, I used to choose a spot on a random street and become invisible in order to observe passers-by, obsessively scribbling notes about the way people carried themselves, looked around, the places they would enter, how thoughts flicker across the forehead. There was a period when my friend and fellow poet, Sevinç Çalhanoğlu, was living in an apartment in Kadıköy. The apartment had a balcony covered in flowering vines. Concealed from view, it overlooked a sad playground. The swings had no seats for the children. I remember Sevinç sitting on the floor just inside the balcony door and editing her poems. She found this dark corner a soothing refuge, especially at a time when she was on the verge of making some major life decisions. Around this time, Sevinç wrote to me saying that I had appeared in her dreams. Pretending to be anarchic dervish poets, we had gone on a rogue excursion to the island of Burgaz in the Prince Archipelago, also known as the Princess Islands. We were so frustrated to find the beach strewn with trash. Jellyfish had also washed ashore. We spent hours collecting all the litter along the water's edge, while trying so hard not to step on the jellyfish.
Yeah, great. A Promenade at Home. It has been 20 years since you moved here. You say 20, but the furniture in this house, okay, fine, 40 years. 42 years, according to our measurements. Team 3 has confirmed that it was your mother's dowry. Well, if you ask my father, what? Ridiculous. How could it have been her dowry? Tell us what happened at home. I will. These walls bone white. Before the bone white, ice blue. Before ice blue, ivory. Before ivory, drizzle. Before drizzle, aquarium. After the aquarium, drizzle. After the drizzle, ivory. After ivory, ice white. No, ice blue. Then bone white. The drapes, the holes and shadows show at noon. The tick-tocks of the clock in the closet.
the tick-tocks of the clock in the head. I wonder which is ticking faster. I blow 7 cloves dry. Fate healing. There used to be a logic to this house, no longer. This terrace used to overlook the sea. This room used to be the bedroom. That room used to be the kids' room. The bathroom never used to be tray grime. The walls were painted canary and navy. Yes, there was real team spirit in this house, and the curtains wore yellow tassels. Now it has iced over. All that is left hanging are cliffs and stalagmites and stalactites and stalagmites. They came and they went, and in the end, they shut her up. As if it weren't enough to silence the walls, they cut the tongues from mirrors, banisters, cornices, everything. In fact, they are not many, just another. A tick of time took her life. A second gave away her secret. A second known to all. "41 times my thumb, and what I split in 3 to hide under the saddle of a horse. Poppy, Poppy, Poppy. Will the home come back to me? Will you come back to me? If you wish to enter, please remove your shoes. Have you forgotten me already? It's me and my peripherals. Please remove your shoes and articulate clearly. Will you tell me what you are hiding in your pocket? 41 times my thumb, and the bite I split in 3 to stash in a snake's bosom. That scorpion, that scorpion, that scorpion. Will the home respond to me? Will you tell me what you are hiding in your pocket? Nail clippings and knots. Will you give them to me? 41 times my right wrist, virgin's urine spilled on infertile soil, fresh cut tongue in a clean bowl, cedar tree, cedar tree, cedar tree. Will the home abandon me? Show me your nucleus. I do not understand you. Will you please repeat your question? I do not understand you. Will you please repeat your question? You are no longer my home. My thought exactly. Will you please repeat your question? I need to learn how to live with that noise. Will you please repeat your question? The moment something crystal glows. Chin. Will you please repeat your question? Either the words get jammed behind my teeth or they echo somewhere up under the roof of my mouth. Will you please repeat your question? Chin, chin, chin. Will you please repeat your question? I must learn to live with this noise. This noise is here to keep me alive. Buttercup family spotlights. This house was given up on ages ago. No one even noticed. Fingertips, couch seams split, rotten Christmas roses, white light bulb, double-sided tape, forever there once applied. Furniture varnish, slip covers, zippers, wooden china cabinets, doorways, hello hallways, black Christmas rose, malleable glossy pungent sticky, bay leaf, pouch, bucketful, swamping trains, dammits, lantern rows. Her eyes on the clock, heavy gilded watch, black hellebore. The watch I always knew was in that room, lying on the bookshelf. My mother looking at it, asking about my father, splitting the hour of his arrival into ticks to track. Her mouth pursed in the bed she lies on. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, without bending her knees now, without touching the bed. Let's bend and bend and bend with our knees so those muscles can relax. You have tensed them too much, Rukiye Hanım. For years and years you have tensed and tensed until you found yourself laid out full length on the bed, Rukiye Hanım. My mother folded a calendar's prayers to protect us when the day came, and so on until she got pregnant. The child, the doctor said, and all the doctors in the world believed the child in her womb would save the sick if only a boy should emerge between her legs, which he did. He would put an end to all this. My mother grew weak while carrying him. The other came upstairs, told my mother to be strong. Dared tell my once strong mother to be strong while standing there, leeching my mother's strength, siphoning it to sheath herself in stolen armor. She stood before the mirror to gaze upon herself, gazing at herself in the mirror, spectacular and fixated, trailed her fingers along the contours of her body and told me, I am more beautiful than your mother, sinking her talons into me. My mother's eyes twitched and she gasped for breath. My brother grew so fast. I guided his walker down the long corridors of our house. He became a big boy, got his teeth into everything, shot his arrows and threw his spears until he stopped growing. It's because of the rapid growth, the doctor said. We cannot stop the spread. So my brother gave up and he stopped growing. He flurried like cotton flurries. The other made my home unbearable loop. Nails she hid in the house rusted. May she be dragged back and hung. In my room, to skip this scene, to go all nine, to go and go all nine. If it were possible to discover a portal to the final level, to learn how other players survive these levels. I asked myself why they had to die. Which chest should I have opened? Which chest should I have avoided? Which room should I have smashed to bits? Into which flying kick should I have spun to save a life? I asked myself why they had to die and what happens to the lives lost before saving. Am I the only one left online? Walking out through that door, through that door, through that door, through that door, and the one before it. And I'll continue with the second part in the book. Melancholia, an inventory. This is a museum now, a mataf. Admission is free, entry is unlimited. Anyone willing to take off their shoes at the door may step inside the museum, but they should not expect a linear visit. Some may get lost inside. This museum has no plan. It laid itself out. It isn't finished yet. It never will be. I invite you in, please. I'll be your guide. Keep close to me. Once, back when the house was a house, The jars in the cellar were full. Strawberry jam was poured into jars while still hot. White and color clothes were washed separately, the whites emerging ever wider. The receipt for the shoes taken to the cobbler, the warranty for the boiler, the teapot, çaydanlık, for special guests. Are these the sorts of odds and ends people see when their lives flash before their eyes? And is it possible that the flash never fades? Museum. Reminiscence of my mother. Captivity of things that were not valued before and of youth that was not appreciated. This is her immortality and my very own vortex that sucks me in. The compartments in the rooms continue to multiply. Every day I notice a new drawer. When I reach for it, it snatches my hand away. I'm marking time, counting the days. For 6 years, counting the days. For 7 years, counting the days. For 8 years, counting the days. For 9 years, counting the days. For 10 years, counting the days. For 11 years, counting the days. For 12 years, counting the days. For 13 years, counting the days. For 14 years, counting the days. Count all you want. Numbers won't change a thing. Outside the house, I cannot use the language I have been taught, and I cannot bring the other language, the outside language, back home with me. When I leave the house, I become someone else to forget what happened at home. I become myself again only when I cross back over the threshold. So I have to alter myself twice daily. Such a tiring thing to do. My mother embraced the furniture to remember the forgotten happiness of the first years of her marriage. Perhaps she made herself believe that by preserving her youth hidden between cushions of her belongings, she would win the war that had been declared. Maybe she knew it all along. Her daughter will perpetuate her aborted life. Daughter, kız çocuğu. Isn't that what it means to be a daughter? I must create meaningful wholes out of the fragments of what she left behind. That is why I stay home all day, dredging up the past. I do not make any messes, but somehow everything turns into a mess behind my back. I cannot get the objects to obey me. I say, my mother is gone. I'm the lady of this house now. You will listen to me. You will do as I say. They say, if your mother were here, she would not approve of the way you clean us, the way you clean the house. You are supposed to begin dusting from the top. So I began from the top. I must earn the loyalty of the objects. I must keep them on my side. The museum is all of my yesterdays, a knot of memories and youthful ambition. There is no space left for the present. Tomorrow is postponed. I pass the evenings journeying through these rooms, a sedentary journey. Still, I end up fatigued. I never know which way will wander, the museum, the artifacts, and I. A feverish passage from one past to another, a feverish pass from one passage to another. Here, time doesn't flow or tick, it grieves. Her voice against my ear, insistent like on mornings when I stubbornly resisted going to school. I'm waiting for you on that road. Get out already. Shoulder me no longer. Let the onions burn, let the colors run. Pour hot strawberry jam into a jar and let it overflow. Then leave, go, and see how your face blossoms. Sometimes I think that it will get better, but it never does. Even if I leave, my habit will remain. I cannot break the habit of my habituation. I cannot break the habit of this habitation.
An interesting venue for the rolling pastime is the hole-in-the-wall subterranean Orthodox shrine beneath Koça Meyhanesi in Moda, one of the oldest Greek taverns still in business. I recall spending many a merry night at the tavern drinking with fellow poets and chanting off-the-cuff limericks. Those in my group would often mimic random objects, pen, spectacles, rocker glass, in order to make fun of my poetry. They would bug out their eyes and emit weird noises. Another friend would record these onomatopoeic ejaculations, and then we would cobble together nonsense words with the sounds while sipping rakı. The shrine is located inside the tavern, in a niche in the basement on the way to the bathroom. One may slip in through the back garden past the kitchen. It is dedicated to the memory of Agia Aikaterini, Saint Catherine of Alexandria, pious virgin daughter of the governor of Alexandria in the early 4th century, who was martyred under the reign of the pagan emperor Maxentius for her monotheism. When Maxentius had her beheaded, a milky liquid was said to flow from her neck instead of blood. The shrine's fountainhead, Ayazma, was later discovered by local Orthodox Christian fishermen. In 1924, the shrine was dedicated to Catherine's memory. The generally accepted myth is that since Saint Catherine rejected her suitors and devoted her life to God, the shrine brought negative romantic wives to lovers, such as maybe this was an ancient cock-block method. There's an alternative subcultural myth among local poets and bohemians that by rolling a spliff at this site, the spell can be broken in favor of the union of lovers. I made them. If one is not too superstitious, the shrine is worth a visit, especially for the enamored. It is a good spot for hanky-panky. The last time I was there, the wafting scent of the fragrant gum raisin myrrh was enough to cover the strong smell of the hash that I was rolling. It gave me a pleasant high of a different sort to behold the burnished gleam of the silver-plated Orthodox iconography all around me, with flickering candlelight illuminating ugly depictions of meathead baby Jesus. A wind caused by nightingales. The best lingering spots in town are located at the other end of Modaburnu Peninsula, near the former Bomonti Beer Garden. Once upon a time, there was a mansion on the meadows of Mustafa'nın Çayırı. The property belonged to the House of Fürstenberg, a Swabian noble family with strong ties to the Habsburg monarchy. After the tragic death of its only heir, Maria Pia, in a car accident, the mansion was left uninhabited for many decades. The meadows themselves are named for one Mustafa, the former dockman at the nearby Moda ferry station, who built a hut next to the abandoned mansion and took care of its premises for many years. Anyone who grew up around Moda in the second half of the last century had their first sexual experience along the fringes of the meadows. The area was also known locally for its small rock lobsters. In the 1960s, it was a coming-of-age ritual for youths to tryst in the shrubs and then steal lobsters from fishermen lodges. There are a number of beautiful old streets that lead from the meadows to the coastline of Moda. One of those streets, Şehit Cem Nuri Başgül Sokak, which runs perpendicular to Cem Karaca Sokak, named for Cem Karaca, a legend of 1970s Anatolian psychedelic rock, passes along the historic campus walls of Lycée Saint-Joseph High School, which was founded in 1870. The walls are covered in purple haze oleander and bordered by mulberry trees, and this spot is a classic rendezvous point for hookey-playing high school couples to neck in the shade of the mulberries on lovely afternoons. One summer night, while restlessly wandering in the streets of Moda, I crossed paths with my fellow poet friend Selcan Peksan in the shadow of the walls of Lycée Saint-Joseph. Selcan, who lives nearby, was out walking her soulful, if slightly intimidating, German shepherd dog, Maya. Selcan and Maya joined me on my wander. I happened to be carrying, as one always does, an edition of the 14th century mystic poet Hafiz's collected ghazals in the original Persian. Selcan began excitedly selecting random couplets out of the Hafiz book, urging me to translate them into Turkish, and based on my translations, to interpretively predict our romantic destinies and the poems we would write in the future. The evening turned into a delirious binge of comparative linguistics and fortune-telling. We came to the realization that poetry is a form of divination, and that poets may well fashion themselves as seers designing their own garden of earthly delights, complete with both Arcadian groves and ghastly traps. I recall Selcan copying down one of Hafiz's intricate couplets, which as I understand it, is about coming to terms with the sweet bitter thorns of love. Oh, that rose seized by the hand of wind each moment. Tell her, shame on such a wind caused by nightingales. Flowers consist of gas, so lively and fresh. In the spring, every one of us will become them. Istanbul doesn't have a color of its own other than gray. Concrete is the predominant tone, massed shapes overwhelming and pressing down upon the individual. I carry within me this immense longing for empty lots, deserted areas yet to be seized by commercial intruders. Slivers in the grid where my fellow poets and I can express ourselves freely, breaking away from the oppressive apparatus of social normativity and the surveillance state. A guerrilla time for kids. Forget your antibiotics. Let me while I drink, love you more, and you could love me. Let everything come together at the jellyfish. We are wallowing in our filth. My antibiotics, clove oil, and tobacco. I'm just like princesses, to the extent that I'm not of this world. I'm gone and waiting for you, which means Allah will suit you. Are you gonna reach nirvana, you dickhead? Former life experiences bygone and unfulfilled. And in order to cut loose, to kiss another body drooling, to flee from the authenticity of the carnal. Apply the ointment on your pain. Let the strong scent cover your palate. Heat up some ginger tea, honey and lemon. Your incessant prayers as if breathing, even in your sleep, indications contradicting the correct axis. Get lost by entering into the world, a process which is called the eyes. Choose the deadlock in the bestial world, and no one knows who we are. Thank you very much.
Questions now. We have time for a few questions. If
Yes.
you would like to ask.
If you would like to.
Or on the Zoom.
Yes, and no pressure.
Giara.
Hey, hello. I was just curious, do you translate your own work or do you have someone who translates for you? And if so, what is kind of the process of navigating both languages and getting what you wrote originally across in different versions?
Do you want to start?
I mean, I can start. I wrote this in English, but
Oh.
of course, I would like to thank my editor, Stefan of Revolves Press. He basically went through all details and recreated the process. And it was actually like through Stefan's editorial help that he actually excavated. So in the original book, I actually met Sevinç a year before my time in Istanbul, but during that time, I also went to, her place. We hang out together in Kadıköy, and he was staying at her friend's place. And then it was through Stefan and my talks through Stefan that I realized that actually when I was writing this book, Sevinç was also writing her Promenade at home. And through looking our past emails, I recrafted that paragraph. So like Stefan was, here with us to brainstorm, correct, learn, amend. And it was like such a interesting moment that I also realized, which I mentioned in the text, that I appeared in Sevinç's dreams and I totally forgot about. And when I checked the emails from 2015 and 16, I realized that actually these two books which we were writing in parallel universes, let's say, also beautifully coincided
Yeah.
through Revolves Press.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it was translated like by Ayça Akarsan, Cansan Mavituna. They are great translators living in Turkey. But again, like our publisher Stefan Lorenzutti. So yeah, he done a great job. So for Promenade, we worked almost every weekend and we sat on Skype and like get over every sentence, every word. Even I kept sending him pictures of the objects at their like ordinary Turkish house. So yeah, it was thanks to him actually. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's give the poets another round of applause.
There's one more
Oh,
question
more
I can order.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not, skip that.
What's the history of your friendship?
That's a very good question.
Our friendship?
Yeah. I mean, I remember actually, I recalled it. So my professor at Harvard, I did my PhD in the history department. He has this one amazing talk series about like vampires.
Night and vampires.
Yeah, the night and vampires. And vampire is that's his research. It's a Turkish word from obur, umpir, which is originally Turkish, and it was first vampires recorded like either in, which was Ottoman Empire then, either Caucasus, today Georgia, or Bulgaria. And it was like a general role in the Ottoman Empire. It was like is a lore that also moved towards to the west and to the Habsburgs. And it is very interesting, like all these people who came to the US, Mayflower and afterwards, and also the Crucible people here in Salem, they came before the vampire lore actually extended over the witch lore. Whereas like before the vampire lore came out, oburs in the Ottoman Empire, all around Europe and the old world, it was mostly witches that represented the evil spirits. So it was like a Halloween night, or not a Halloween night, but in December in Istanbul, my professor was giving a talk on vampires and the history of vampires in the Ottoman Empire. And then through our common PhD friend Akif,
Yes.
who's also your friend from Bosphorus University, he introduced us, and Sevinç
she's a poet and he's a poet. Why don't you guys
we
meet
bonded over. She sent her poetry to me, and then I definitely fell in love. I went back to Cambridge, and then like we continued crazily
Yes.
sending us
Sending
emails to each other. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
here we are, I guess.
Under the roof of the same
Yes,
publishing press.
as
and,
publishing
yeah.
press, and yeah. Thank you for that question.
Well, we can finish the evening then.
Yeah, and then we can have a conversation, please. Say hi, and
Yeah.
we can have a. Please.
How did you go about finding illustrators for your work? Did you did your own, and then did you do both of them actually?
No, for your case.
For my case, it belongs to a very good Turkish artist, Can Aytekin. He teaches at Mimar Sinan. I knew his name because he had this amazing show just before college. Arter is one of the very hip places in Istanbul. And then literally the person is there, looks like me, and it was Stefan. Through his talking, he found Can Aytekin. I don't know how. And then he
through
found,
Instagram,
because he's known for his suprematist paintings, mostly colorful and geographic. But then I have geometric, sorry, but then I have never seen the series. And luckily enough, his series belongs to Sevmek Zamanı, Time to Love, is a 1968 Turkish classic novel vogue, or this black and white 60s French film style. Very influential work, which in my class, my students, we definitely watched that amazing film. And these are his scenes from Sevmek Zamanı, and this is supposed to be, I think, the Istanbul walls, in the old district today in near Yedikule.
But so you didn't find it?
I didn't find it.
Stefan
found about it, but then Can also really loved the idea that the picture or the drawing fit with the prose, and literally it kind of looks like, because I always wear black. And so it was a nice coincidence.
And yeah, this shadowy look.
And our friend Begüm, and I think she's not here. I hope
yes.
she's watching us. And she did the amazing GIS map. She finished the Northeastern, did a master's, and now she's a master of GIS map. And we try to do this claustrophobic places where I go, also designated the places where I mention in the text.
So for my case, yeah, the cover is by one of my friends, Ürününü Al. So I accidentally actually saw that she's working on those watercolor paintings, and I wrote her immediately that I'm working on this book and I think they match a lot. And Stefan get into contact with her, and then she painted something especially for this book. Yeah, I love this one. But for the inside paintings, these all are my paintings and illustrations. And yeah, this all happened last year actually. So I was supposed to expand the book in Turkish, but somehow I couldn't do it with words. And then I started to do some paintings, and I felt so good about it, doing just paintings and oil paintings. And when you will get the book, you'll see it's almost mixed media. Yeah, I love you can't really see the original versions of these, but these are the oil brush paintings. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, it just came actually with very instinctively. Since I couldn't write more, I decided to paint.
And it's integrated, because you read through that door, through that door, through that door, the penultimate one. There is this beautiful drawing that's kind of Escher, it just captures your mind. It it seems that you will slip through the door, but then you see this impossible angle.
Yeah, where was that? Let me. Yeah, it was this painting that here.
Yeah, some of the things that she reads definitely corresponds to some of her paintings.
Yeah, but they're not in order afterward that you see the painting, but it's
Oh, okay.
we give space to the because of the Zoom reading.
Okay.
You felt that way.
because at Zoom,
Yes, we did.
you reflected the
It was more direct.
corresponding. So thank you very much
Thank you.
for you coming here. Any other questions or please?
Are you guys working on any new project?
My cycle of poems will come out from Bordels Press. So that was the initial idea. Actually, I wrote this many years ago, and I actually did not want this kind of be in circulation for both personal reasons and like for academic reasons, I guess. But then like Stefan saw this, and then he said like, I'm publishing this. So our actual initial contract was publish a cycle of poems by me, which are being translated by Murad Nejat. He's like a very established senior translator. He has been translating works from Turkish like last almost 60 years from our high school, Robert College. Went to Amherst and Columbia and lived many years in New York. But at the same time, I don't want to push him because he's a senior person, and you know, we have like a 6 years age difference or something. So I just don't want. Also, like this just came out because Stefan really loved it, like, and said I'm publishing this, even though you know I had some initial hesitations, and I'm glad. And thank you for publishing this, Stefan. If you hear us, thank you.
And also we have a book
Yes.
that will working on it after
Yes.
tomorrow.
True, actually tomorrow. So our friend that you very well know, Emre, Sina. With Sina, we have a poetry book coming out.
Or is it tomorrow that we meet?
Tomorrow
No,
we
like
are
we
meeting.
will,
Yes.
yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow.
So Sina is a quantum physicist, and I have been during the past 7-8 years right now, like getting consensual and unconsensual recordings, sound recordings, mostly unconsensual, and I basically edited them and revise them and make poetry. And my cycle that will be published from Bordel Press is mostly playing with sound recordings. Friends write. I discovered we talk with James of Grolier, that he has been also who lived in Waltham, a great poet. Friends write also have been doing similar things, very interesting. And with Sina, he's a quantum physicist. We delve into this discussion about symmetry breakings and scattering theory. And then I recorded, transcribed, and then turned them into like cutting a, you know, like a stone slab, turned it into these like beautiful mystical poems. And, you know, we got a grant from European Union, and hopefully Sevinç will design the book and maybe edit, hopefully.
Yes.
So, you know, we need a third eye. And it will come up in Turkey and other places in Europe next
very
year.
soon, yeah.
So like we have another book like coming in June, hopefully July, which will be also like in English. Thank you, Sina, by the way.
Yeah.
Let's give the poets another round of applause. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. Our next hybrid reading is this Friday. It is the launch of Spoke 8, which is a poetry annual. We'll have it in here. There are still some seats available, both in person and online. We have some books for sale. The poets will be signing books over here, taking photographs.
I know.
Everyone could please take their seats and move them up against the wall. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
You signed it.
Yes, I will. Don't worry. While sorting my sleep.
He has a great signature.
First roll, nice one.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for coming, Aida.